Today we have a very special guest. This is Michael Konopaski. So Michael is the managing director of Designed Wealth and brings over 30 years of experience building and leading investment dealers across Canada and the US. So as a former portfolio manager and CPA, Mike provides strategic direction and guidance to advisors as they develop and grow their practices. So Michael is the founder of the IIAC Small and Independent Dealer Committee. He served as the vice chair of the CIRO Financial and Operations Advisory Section and is currently on the CIRO Ontario District Council. So he holds a master's in finance, a PhD in management, and a certified financial planner, and a chartered investment manager designation. So thank you so much for joining us, Michael. You bring a ton of insight, so we're very excited to interview you today.
Thanks.
So thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So let's just kick it off, because no doubt there's going to be many small, medium, even larger size business owners that want to learn about you and want to learn how you reached to where you are. So why don't we just take it back to the very beginning, if that's okay, Michael? What's the story? Like, how did you get started, and what was your very first real sale?
So, back when I was 4 or 5 years old, my father used to take me to the Toronto Blue Jays games, and I noticed at that age that people would buy a paper program and leave it under their seat after the game. So I went around collecting those programs and took them home and went up and down my street and tried to sell them to people in the neighborhood. So I don't know of any point in my life when I wasn't doing sales. I think that to me it came quite naturally. But in terms of business, my father was a great mentor in that he was always in a performance-based sort of entrepreneurial role. He started his own business. I joined him after I had graduated from university, and we worked together. Sadly, he passed away a few years ago, but we built up a pretty good business, which is an investment dealer business in Canada. And, one thing led to another, but that business sold in 2020 to a big public financial giant. At that point, I was out of work. I had a non-solicit and a lot of time on my hands. I was 48 years old, and I took 2 weeks off. This is the middle of COVID. You couldn't really travel anywhere. So here I was with all the time in the world and no place to go. So I was able to find that you could go to Vancouver Island. I went to Victoria for 2 weeks by myself with no real plan, just to kind of decompress. And what I thought I would do is start up a similar style of business. So in September of 2021, a business partner of mine that had worked together with me at a former business started Designed Wealth, and we opened our first account in September of 2021.
Wow, that's awesome. So definitely sometimes, unfortunately, when one traumatic thing happens, sometimes you can find growth in that, right? When you have no choice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, and just for those who don't know what, such as myself, what is a paper program? You mentioned that was your first sale. You got that from the people's seats at a baseball game. For ignorant people like me, what is that? What's a paper program?
So it's not as common anymore, but 45 years ago, you would go to a baseball game or a hockey game, and it would have the team lineups, the names of the players, the numbers, some ads in the middle. It talked about the season to date, the progress of the team. And, you could buy them for $2 or $5, and it usually talked a bit about the opponent. So it was quite common for people to buy a program to learn about the upcoming game and something as a bit of a souvenir to take home.
Cool. Awesome. Alrighty. All right. Well, looking at your business today, you've built a very successful practice and it's continuing to grow. But what does growth mean to you at this point? Is it about revenue? Is it about market share, team size, something else? What does growth mean to you?
So growth to me is something that I see as not a finite end. I grew up in a family owned and operated business, and you don't think of selling a family business, you think of transitioning it to the next generation. Um, but but generally, what we found is there's a gap in the marketplace for what we offer, and we see unlimited potential on the upside. So in Canada, we compete against essentially the largest companies in the country. So we're up against TD Bank, RBC, some American financial conglomerates like Raymond James and Edward Jones. So we're up against some very stiff competition, but growth in the first 2 to 3 years of our business was basically legitimacy, having enough credibility to become viable and to show the public that we were going to make it. We started with $100,000 a month in expenses and no sales, no advisors, no revenue. So you basically feeding off of shareholder loans and just racing against the clock, trying to build some mass. And then once you hit that point where you're breaking even, which is typically 3 to 3.5 years in our industry, then it's sort of like, well, how big do you want it to get? And the reality is, there's no real goal for us. So we could sit down and say we want to get to 200 advisors or 500 advisors, but the truth is we have a business model. We want to offer great service to our advisors, but the truth is our target market are advisors that really want to be left alone. They want to run their own business. They want to have their own branding. And as long as they put their client first, really that's our target market. So um, it's really a business which is not for sale. We don't think of it as being for sale. So, survival in the first 3 years, and then you kind of strategize and think about the second phase of the business. And for us, we think beyond being $100 billion in assets under administration. We just started a US business, which is at least 10 times bigger of a market. So we don't really see the end. So right now we're trying to figure out how to scale, but also provide good, customized, flexible experience for advisors.
All right. So, like, are you providing support for your advisors in terms of, sure, you're doing product training and mentoring and stuff like that, which is super integral. But how do you ensure that your advisors are, being proactive and promoting themselves enough?
So our model is for the independent advisor. So it's for somebody that used to work at a larger firm, could be a Canadian bank, could be an insurance company, could be a large global conglomerate. They find that they don't fit within the mold or inside of that box or that structure. So what we do is we provide a platform which gives them access to do the same kinds of things, trading stocks, um, recommending mutual funds to clients, different types of products. But we have 175 advisors with 175 different business models, which is a unique business model in itself. So rather than say, here is how we do things, take it or leave it, each one of our advisors has a la carte sort of experience. So we don't tend to sign enterprise deals and say this is the financial planning software program that we're all going to use, and by the way, you have to pay for it. Same thing with CRMs, same thing with research. So every branch, whether it's in Vancouver Island or Halifax, Nova Scotia, looks and feels different. They each have their own website. They each do their own branding and marketing, and we can help them along the way. Some of them are very sophisticated, using Google Analytics and all kinds of different things. And some are just starting off and asking questions like, who do I call to build my own website? I used to work at a bank. Everything was done for me. Where do I start? So we have, both extremes and then everything in the middle.
Lots of experience. So, what would you say that your vision for sales is in the next 3 to 5 years? Like for each of those years, on a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to that vision?
Well, this is interesting because we're up to 50 head office staff, and let's say if you include our advisors and their teams in the different communities in Canada, we're probably close to 400 people as a company. Um, as the visionary, and I have the only profile within our firm. We do some psychometrics, some instinctive strengths tests. I'm the only one that sort of sees things in the way that a visionary would.
Mhm.
We're just going through a process of formalizing the vision to writing it down so that it can be pervasive throughout the business.
Mhm.
It's not easy because I'm sometimes 2 or 3 years ahead in my mind. I'm already sort of there, but I haven't explained it to everyone else how
Mhm.
we got there. So we're trying to go through a more formal process that way. We talk about being $1 trillion business. Um, some of our competitors, they would roll their eyes, or they would be very skeptical, as to the potential of even contemplating that. We don't, I mean, Fidelity Investments never sold to anybody. Somebody sat around and built RBC from the ground up. The truth is, we have very big goals. We're very ambitious, but we're at 7 billion in assets under administration at this point. We think we can get to 20 billion by the end of 2026. We think we can get to 100 billion at the end of 3 years. And with our US business, which is Designed Wealth USA, we think the sky is the limit.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's taking a different mindset. The first 3 years, you're trying to basically pay the bills.
Mhm.
You're looking at a 2 to 3 year sales cycle in our business. So from the first time I talk to an advisor that's unhappy where they are, that could be anywhere from a year to 4 years before they actually decide to leave where they are. It's not an easy thing to do for an advisor to leave one dealer to move to another, because you can't do a bulk
Mhm.
transfer. So when an advisor leaves a firm, they have to get each and every one of their clients to agree to the move. So there's a lot of work, there's a lot of uncertainty. So it's a very sticky business. It's a very hard business to build because, again, you're up against the most sophisticated, most well capitalized firms on the planet, really, and 97 to 98% of advisors will never leave their dealer. So we're all sort of fighting for this. It's a very big industry, but it's a relatively small marketplace of people that are sort of unhappy and looking for a change.
Mhm.
But we have carved out, within our space. We use blue ocean strategy, so we tend to do things nobody else does, and maybe it's not as profitable, but it leads to a clearer path to growth. But we're starting to become more focused on sort of goals in terms of size of assets, but generally, we don't think of goals in terms of profitability. We put all of our money back into the service model.
Cool. Awesome. So, all right. So, what would you say? Kind of, this is a sales podcast, right? So,
Mhm.
service obviously one of the most important aspects, but like, how are you generating leads right now? There's so much competition, right? Like, how is it different now than when you first started?
So the having started in the business in 1995, there was no such thing as digital marketing. We have changed in that most of the sort of print marketing has gone to digital. Um, but we use
Mhm.
the Glengarry, Glen Ross, um, old ratios from 50 years ago. So we have X number of calls, leads to X number of meetings, leads to
Mhm.
X number of closings. And the truth is, when you're up against the likes of Scotia and BMO, you can't outmuscle them. You don't have the financial power. You don't have the hundreds of millions of dollars to put into your brand. So you have to do things that are different, but on a relatively small budget. So one of the things we realized early on is nobody's sending direct mail anymore. And we found that there's no study, or there aren't any statistics, but in our opinion, 20 to 40% of financial advisors don't have a website, nor do they have a LinkedIn profile. So how do you reach them? They're not active. They're not on Instagram. They're not using, for the most part, social media.
Mm-hmm.
They like to read the paper. The average age of an advisor in North America is in between 50 and 60. So you have to think to yourself, how do you get in front of these people? And nobody's sending mail. So we started doing huge mail drops, which is very rare. And, after 3 years, I'm seeing advisors at conferences from other dealers saying, yep, I'm getting your mail. And haven't decided to leave yet, but now I know about you. And it's the repetition. So it's being visible, it's being in front of them. A LinkedIn premium account is a very inexpensive way to get going, but I've probably spent 5,000 hours on LinkedIn in the past 4.5 years. It's literally 2 hours to 3 hours every day, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, building connections, creating content. We don't use stock photos, and I learned a bit about the algorithm. I know that it's a fairly secretive thing, but they always say don't use LinkedIn like Facebook. But what really works is organic content with real people in the photo, and a story that's not been taken from some AI app. So something that's authentic, something that feels very transparent, and spending a lot of time actually has been a worthwhile investment for us. There's all kinds of other things, but we have to do what nobody else is doing. And we just it's just harder. Like we have a budget for digital ads and investment periodicals and publications, but again, we can be wiped out by the companies like Sun Life and Manulife in terms of trying to promote our brand. So what we try to do is we try to write organic content, which seems to resonate with the target market that we're going after.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, because not only is there a lot of competition, there's a lot of fluff, right? There's a lot of fluff that is just floating through these channels. A lot of self-serving. Self-promotion is good, but when you're dealing with sophisticated customers and accounts, they're going to see through that instantly. So I would imagine your messaging strategy not only has to be adjusted, not only having organic content and pushing it out there consistently, like you said, putting the hours in, but it's also like how do you separate yourself from all the noise? Like, what is the actual formatting of the messaging that's and this, you may not have that answer right now, but it's something to think about, because formatting of messages even 5 years ago could have worked, but if you did the same tactic, the same positioning, now may not be as effective. So yeah, it's just interesting how messaging changes.
Well, it's trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
And things that you may thought have gone out of style probably haven't. Like, I hired a sales coach 3.5 years ago because what I was doing, it wasn't working. And he was a very sort of 1980s sales coach, but he taught me that the entrepreneur is very excited about what they're doing, and you can tend to talk about how great your offering is, but not focusing on what is the pain point and how to solve it.
Right.
And the reality is, and people ask me, how did you go from 0 to 7 billion with almost no budget against the biggest companies in Canada? And the truth is, you have to be very clear in that this is a big decision for somebody to make, to leave a firm to join another. And the reason that you're going to join us versus all of the other choices is because we have a solution for your problem. So you have to do lots of listening, and sometimes they're not forthcoming. They don't always tell you what the pain is. You can suspect it, what it is, because we have a good sort of market intelligence or awareness of what's going on at our competition. but until they come right out and say it, it could be any one of 10 different reasons why they're unhappy. But,
Mhm.
if they don't tell you what that is, you have to be patient. You can't be pushy. And we never make calls to advisors. The only people we deal with are people that call us first, because you can't convince somebody to leave where they are. They have to have already made that decision
Right.
themselves. Then when we can find those people, then we have to explain to
Mhm.
them, of all of the choices you have, why would you join us?
Mhm. Totally. And let's say they did want to, we could, it could be a better firm to work with. That's the easy part. But the hard part is you got to switch your firm. You got to move over your clients. You got to spend time, money, resources, willingness, investment, right?
Hmm.
So it's not just, in my opinion, as a person in kind of a sales role, it's easy it's easy to be successful if you switch over, but it's hard to switch over. So is how do you communicate that value, and how do they know what is required so that you don't waste your time spending all this time, money, and resources trying to convince someone. It sounds great, but then there's the hard part where there's going to be work involved, right? And I hear that from other people. Like sure, you spend all this time sitting with an advisor, a client, and it's a very compelling offer, and they definitely want to do it until they realize what's involved. Then it becomes a lot harder. So you probably have a process where you're communicating that with them. Otherwise,
Yeah, I
you wouldn't be
mean,
growing so quickly.
anytime I've called somebody to try and explain to them why they should move, that never works. So you have to find the most miserable, unhappy people in the industry, but everyone else knows they're miserable too. So now you're talking to an advisor at a dealer who 10 different dealers know that they're moving, and we don't have. So what's happening in the investment industry is there's a billions of dollars sloshing around from US private equity, sovereign funds from the Middle East. you know Advisors are being offered 5, 10, $15 million to move from one dealer to another, and we just don't do that. So we don't pay any money for advisors to come over, so they have to join us for the right reasons. And it's just it's very tough when you've been on 7 or 8 calls with an advisor and they tell you your platform is much better than where I'm going, but $5 million is $5 million.
Right. Yeah. It's an offer you can't refuse.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, okay. So, you're growing at a considerably good rate. Who wouldn't want to do more? And you're continuing to. But every business, they have like a messy middle. There's a messy part. Or is the messy circumstance or messy circumstances like business leaders, they go through a lot, right? It's not as glamorous as people that may not be running businesses think. It's very tough, right? So can you share a time when a deal or a hire or a strategy didn't go as planned, and what did you learn from it?
There's When you're in business development in our industry, like I'm dealing with a 98% failure rate. Like
Mm-hmm.
2% of what I do every day works.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have the resilience to just keep pushing forward. But something that came up recently, so we spent over a year with a group of advisors. They had agreed to join us. We probably spent over 100 hours preparing for them to join us. They resigned from their dealer. 2 weeks later, their current dealer said, "We'll come and see you. We're going to fix all of those things you've been complaining about. We're going to wave a magic wand and fix everything." And they called us and said, "Actually, we're not coming now." Right. So, like these are, this is very deflating for a team. When
Mm-hmm.
you've done all you can, but it's still not enough.
Okay.
And, the fact is and I've been in this business 30 years. I've never seen the level of sophistication, the level of capital. So your imagination and your foresight has to be maximum every day,
Mm-hmm.
because the big companies are like, there used to be low hanging fruit in the industry, then there just isn't anymore. There's nothing easy, and you fight for every scrap. So for us, we're constantly changing and amending our business model, and we're going after things. Like, if you looked at our plan, our written plan from 4 years ago, it's very different from now than from what it was. But the market, to us, it emerges. So we don't target a market. The market emerges. So our biggest branch is in Regina, Saskatchewan. Most Toronto-based companies don't sit around a table mapping out how their biggest branch is going to be in a relatively small Western Canadian community. But what happens is you find out where the gaps are, and you go for them. But what's been very frustrating is when you get on 10, 15 calls with somebody over 18 months, and they end up not joining.
Oh yeah.
And that's just part of the business. But we keep trying, and thankfully we haven't had any real catastrophic setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's signing contracts, or whether it's just executing in our business model, we've been quite fortunate. But again, we've been doing this a long time, so it's not like there's a lot of surprises. But you just never know. Like, tomorrow, it could be that one thing that you never expected.
Got it. All right. So, as you look ahead for the next 12 to 24 months, and you were saying that you do have to have some foresight, and you try to have as much foresight as possible. So what do you think is going to be the biggest growth or transformation in your business, your world, the industry? And what's the biggest risk on your radar? I'm sure there's going to be a ton of transformation, especially with AI, with how selling process, or maybe not.
When you look at financial services, so we've just entered the US market. So we're now registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission with a registered investment advisor business. And the two markets, Canada and the US, are completely opposite. So in Canada, you have an oligopoly, which is very powerful, and it's winning. So independence in Canada is losing. So there are some great success stories, like we've seemed to be okay in terms of getting off the ground, and there's a sprinkle of other small success stories, but more or less the banks are winning. So when you look forward, the first 3 or 4 years, you're sort of waving the flag of independence. But then, if 90% of the market is owned by the banks, then you have to start, if you want to grow your market share, you have to start looking and feeling more like a bank, because the high net worth market in Canada don't care all that much that you're independent. They care that you're great. And in the next 2-3 years, if we want to get bank advisors to join us, we have to feel more like a bank to the advisor, to the client, offer things the bank offers, like transactional banking, like private banking, like just different things you would get if you went into one of the Canadian-owned banks. In the US, it's completely different. There is more of a push towards independence, away from the large traditional sort of Wall Street conglomerate. So there's really two different business models, but I think it's showing to the rest of the marketplace that we have some structure. We're not just entrepreneurial. We're not just fast growth, because the investor with the life savings doesn't care if you're entrepreneurial. They care that you can protect their money. Yeah. So it's a balance. It's probably the hardest balance in our industry, to be known as different and independent yet safe. And that's why the Canadian banks have done so well, is because they sell safeness and predictability. So I think for us, the next 12 to 24 months is trying to feel more and offer more that a bank would offer.
Cool. All right, thank you. So now, in your world, you don't call yourself salespeople, right? It's almost kind of like a dirty word, even though technically you are, right? That's exactly what you are. You want to call yourself a salesperson, a business development rep, a rainmaker, an account development, whatever. At the end of the day, your part of your role is to go out and find new opportunities, right? Initiate conversations, maybe from people that haven't heard from you, aren't expecting to hear from you, or don't know you too well, right? So how do you approach, if you don't want to call it sales effectiveness, if you want to call it something else, business development, account growth, whatever, how do you approach sales effectiveness training and development, both for yourself, for your team, for your advisors you're bringing on? Like, what does that look like for you?
So in the first life of the business, I mean, we have a sales team of one, but you can't scale that. So what we're doing now is some of my colleagues are starting to do some of the product calls, the demos. Typically I would take the first call and then pass it to somebody else to show them the platform. They can log in. Here's how you do a trade. Here's how you send money to a client, those kinds of things. But the future is, I guess, what's known as productizing your expertise. So that would be having, clear messaging in brochures, videos. Here's 5 minutes to tell you why you might consider joining us. That's expensive. It's time consuming. These things have to be, like, the amount of budget our competitors are spending on these types of materials is into the hundreds of millions of dollars. So, you have to be confident that, if you're just to change a brand or a logo or an emblem, it could be $100,000, right? Like, so you got to make sure you're spending the money wisely with the right people. But it's now, how do you trickle down the knowledge? So it's not, sales isn't just about answering questions about your business. It's getting people to feel like you're the right type of business to join. These are the right people I want to build my future with. And with us, where we've been successful is just being authentic and being transparent. When people ask us a question, we give them a direct answer, which you don't often get in finance. There's a lot of double talk, a lot of polish, but not a lot of real sort of down to earth. Like, let's just answer the question. So they ask you a question. There are no secrets. Here's how it works. And believe it or not, that there's not a lot of that going on in the investment world. So we've done really well. It's almost folksy, organic, like, just sort of, here we are. We do really well in smaller centers. I think that once you find who you're more likely to resonate with, you try to spend more time with those types of advisors. But I think generally having what I've learned passed down to others, because it's just hours in a week game. I can't spend more than 40 to 50 hours a week talking to prospects. It's too much. So it's making sure that people that are joining the team, and we now would call it a business development team, that they understand things in the same way. Answering the question, about how do we do certain types of things is fairly simple. But when somebody asks, like, well, at what point are you too big? Like, how do you train a junior business development associate how to answer those types of questions? It's just them observing, learning, immersing themselves in the sales process.
Cool. Yeah, totally. So, like, when you do hire a business development rep, what are some of the greatest challenges you've experienced so far? And I'm sure this question is going to everyone in the audience who runs a business and they're hiring salespeople. This is probably going to hit them viscerally, because salespeople, business development reps, tend to be, in our experience, the hardest to hire because they look excellent on a resume. They look even better in an interview. But when the rubber hits the asphalt and they actually have to do the business development behavior repeatedly, like you said, numbers consistently, sometimes there's gaps. So what are the challenges that maybe you haven't had? Maybe you've just hit it out the park every time. What challenges do you have when it comes to hiring business development reps?
Well, this is probably the easiest question to answer of all. And I haven't been in construction. I haven't been in, software development, but in financial services, business development people make a lot of money. And it's not uncommon for a 25-year-old business development associate with 2 or 3 years of experience to make more money than a CEO of a small investment dealer would make.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the most difficult part. Now, when I was a kid, my father said you should get paid based on results. So when I first started, I was paid based on results. I had no salary. Every business development person I've ever talked to, and I've talked to hundreds of them, all get a salary plus bonus. And when I get on calls with potential people to add to the team, and I say, I'll pay you, like if I have to pay you over $1 million a year based on results and you deliver results, I'll pay it. But I struggle to pay somebody a huge salary to go out and maybe get me results.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a philosophical thing. It's a belief, but it's really when you boil it down, there's very few people that want to go and get paid based on solely on results. It's very difficult to find. Everybody wants a safety net, right? And you'll only find out 12 months because our sales cycle is 2 to 3 years. I'm not even gonna know if they're any good or not until I may have known them for years just because from being in the industry. But to pay somebody, it could be $500,000 a year to get nothing is a frightening, especially when you're first starting. So that and I've hired for compliance, I've hired for accounting, I've hired for operations. Business development is easily, and I can only imagine it's the same in bigger markets, but in Toronto, the market for salaries is seriously high, and good for them, right? It's good for people in that space, but if you're an upstart company, you just don't have the budget to pay somebody more than maybe your 2 or 3 key people in your business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, not uncommon. We hear this a lot, and definitely in your world. But the cost of a bad hire can be 3 times their salary, right? So you lose the salary that you spent on them and they didn't produce. You lose the salary on the fact that they just didn't. There's a gap of non-production, and then you lose the salary. Now you have to go and retrain someone else. So this isn't uncommon, and a lot of times people will hire based on, not saying that you do this, but you brought it up. I know this guy. He's a good guy. He's a friend of mine, or he did really well before, or he's a referral. Someone told me he's really good, or you have your experience, or you have an intuitive inclination that this person is effective. But in our world, what we have realized that if you're not using third-party data-driven processes with excruciatingly effective predictability, knowing before you hire them if they are going to do the behavior or not. If you're not using those tools, you could get burned so bad. And we hear this all the time. So it's like someone could look great, like I said, in an interview and a resume, but when it comes to, are they going to be facing some type of anxiety in the field that would prevent them from asking the really important question that they need to ask because they don't want to seem like they're not credible? Like a lot of people in business development roles truly believe that the more questions I ask, the less credible I seem in the client or customers or prospects' eyes. So they don't ask the questions, or they feel like they are too low. They don't have equal business stature, so they don't approach the right person, another anxiety. Or they feel like they're never prepared enough. I need more information. I need more research on this person before I can approach them. I'm not prepared. So again, they're avoiding the behavior. Or there's the 100-pound phone, like they just can't pick up the phone. Or they don't want to be proactive because they feel that they are pestering people. So they avoid the behavior. Or are they actually motivated to grow? Are they actually motivated to take direction from someone else? Right? So a lot, you're not going to find this out based on a conversation. Do they have the skills in specific areas of the sales cycle to, tackle these types of conversations? with prospects and clients. So in my humble opinion, gone are the days are hiring people without some type of third party data driven customized assessment review of someone, because you're just hiring someone on inclination. That's a massive risk, and an expensive risk at that, because of the salary concept. So yeah, we see this all the time. Growing businesses, successful businesses, common theme, right? Common theme. So like, what is the most important thing that you're looking for in a business development rep? And okay, what's the most important thing, and how would you set them up, and reinforce that behavior to ensure that that's going to continue?
So our current business development team are all people that work for us in some other role within the company. So we've gone down the road multiple times of trying to bring somebody in from outside to learn our platform, to learn our
Mm-hmm.
way of doing things. It's just never worked out. So in this phase of our business, it's people that have worked with us. They understand what we do, how we do it. They feel the vibe of the business, and they're knowledgeable enough to go out and get in front of people. The future of business development for us will be somebody that has worked in a bank, who knows that the ins and outs of selling to bank advisors. That will be those types of salespeople will be very expensive. But again, if we want to go after the bigger part of the marketplace, which is 80 to 90% of the market in Canada, it will take somebody with the savvy that has gone and done the road shows, done the long trips, done the hard calls, which is going to come at a great cost. But it's sort of like the leap you have to take if you want to get into that part of the industry.
Mm-hmm. So when you think about your own leadership, and you have a ton of leadership experience, what would you say is the hardest adjustment you've had to make as the company has grown? Because without strong leadership, it
Mhm.
can generally it falls down. And to add to that, a lot of times people, this is kind of off on a tangent, a lot of people that were killed like rock stars, like superstars in their roles, they get promoted to leadership. But then once they're in leadership, it's a completely different ballgame. So how do you adjust your leadership as your company grows?
I've been fortunate. Like I'm a recovering professor. I was a tenured professor. I was at two universities, 17 years. I gave that up, but I have the theoretical understanding of management, leadership. There's a difference between management and leadership. Um, I don't tend to be a manager. I tend to be a servant leader. I learned a long time ago, your best customer is your staff. If you treat them well, they'll make you lots of money. And sort of something that I've used for a very long time. I tend to stay out of the way. I tend to let I don't believe you should have to motivate people. You should hire motivated people. People that aren't motivated or don't fit in with the culture don't tend to last very long. So we're going through this sort of rebranding, reframing of how we do things. And I was in strategic coach 30 years ago, in 1995. There's a concept in strategic coach called the self-managing team,
Mm-hmm.
and it's basically hiring the right people that are on the bus, that sort of see the vision, that can help you run the business. So I don't have to. That's it's We're in a transition of that. I'm trying to do virtually no management, try to just be over in the corner. I've carved out, these are the things I'm good at. These are where I can provide most value in the business. It's not in either leadership or management. I'm too old for mentoring. I'm tired of it. I don't want to sit around with junior staff and, talk about the good old days. So it's having that next group, within the team to take on all of the stuff that somebody like me would have done in the past. But it's stepping away from the day-to-day activities and trying to focus on sort of creative influence and conceptual, strategic, and where things heading. That's what I'm trying to do right now.
Mm, cool. Got it. So as we come to the conclusion, if you could give one piece of advice for an Ontario business owner in your industry specifically, uh, who's just hit a growth ceiling, or as you know, most advisors they fail in the first year, right? Unfortunately. So, what piece of advice would you give an Ontario business owner in your industry who's hit a growth ceiling? Like, what would it be?
Your customers can be anywhere um, for too long. So this would be the answer. I would give you the same answer if you asked me the question, if you could do it all over again, what would you do different? Um, don't target a market. Offer something great, and your market will emerge. It could be in California. It could be in northern Alberta, but think bigger than your obvious what used to be you would think your market. So for us, um, like an Ontario entrepreneur is probably thinking my customers are local. I'm going to join the Rotary Club. I'm going to join the local golf club. I'll go to the Chamber of Commerce meetings. It's just not how it works anymore. You'll spend a lot of time wasting getting nowhere in a very small sphere. But I would say think 100 times bigger and do things that will get you 100 times bigger rather than doing things that will double the size of your business. Do things every day that will make your business 1,000 times bigger. and
Hmm.
and that's something we've done more recently is stop thinking about incremental moves.
Awesome. Love it. Well, hey, that was super insightful. I appreciate your advice and your experience. And this is, people are going to definitely have some questions when they review this. But appreciate your time, Michael.
Well,
Um,
thanks for inviting me.
Alrighty, we'll see you soon. And to our guests, thank you for watching. See ya in a bit.